what makes for a good property manager versus a not so good property manager? This is actually a little bit tricky to answer. Now, the actual answer to the question is kind of easy. What's a good property manager versus the bad one? The tricky part, I think, is figuring out how to decide which category property manager falls in. So, what makes for a good property manager? I mean, ultimately, they take care of your investment well and your money well. I mean, it's that easy. So they keep up on maintenance. They ensure that all maintenance is taken care of to a good standard. They screen tenants really well, so they try and place the best tenants they can. So it's really about tenant quality. A huge one for me, and I'll probably hit on this multiple times in this video, almost probably ad nauseum, for me is communication. My biggest thing, because I'm trusting a property manager to manage my investment property, I'm not a micromanager, and I'm one of those people where if things are going well, you're never going to hear from me. I'm not one of those people that's like, how's it going now? How's it going now? The only time I do that is when the property manager is no longer seeming to perform and I want to know information. But ultimately, the lines of communication are huge because you as the investor, this person is taking care of your investment property. And if the lines of communication are not there, in my experience, I'll hit on this more, my experience is that when the lines of communication are not there, the quality of the management is probably not there either. So communication is a huge one. So if you end up with a property manager who communicates really easily, they're really good at what they do, they know how to screen tenants, they're really up on the laws, they are, I knew a property manager one time in Chicago who had been in business for 15 years and they had only dealt with 4 evictions. That's absurd in a good way. And one of the things that they would do is if a tenant wasn't paying or doing whatever that would constitute possible eviction, they were really strategic in how to work with that tenant to avoid the eviction process. This was a Chicago property manager. In Illinois is notoriously a tenant-friendly state, not landlord. So the eviction process is actually not very graceful in Illinois. So in order to try and alleviate all of the stress of that and the finances of it, the expenses of it, whatever, for the owner, this property manager had these really clever strategies on how to either get the tenant performing or to get the tenant out kind of at their own, leisure versus having to go through eviction. That is a really good property manager. Like, they can be really good at what they do. So ultimately, a good property manager is going to take care of your investment and make sure you're getting every penny possible as a return on that investment. What do bad property managers do? One of the worst ones I had placed I think the tenant was qualified, but a really bad tenant, one of my properties, and this tenant took so little care of the property, he ended up smoking out the whole house. This was a 2.5-story house from the fireplace, and it was a $25,000 rehab. That's a bad tenant. The property manager just all willy-nilly put this guy in there, barely even checked with other people. He never went and checked on the house. That house was smoked out. Like, I mean, we're talking black walls. Even the bathtub upstairs was pitch black from all the soot and whatever. It was like that apparently for like 2.5 months. Property manager never knew. He never conducted inspections. His lines of communication with me were terrible. Like, that's the first thing to go in my experience is when the communication gets bad. There's other stuff going on. Maybe they mismanage your funds. Maybe they nickel and dime you on repair costs. Maybe the repair really costs $200, but they charge you $250. Whether they're transparent about that or not is another situation. So constantly costing you money. Maybe, tweaking maintenance requests to work in their favor. There's all sorts of ways that a bad property manager can be bad, but ultimately what a bad property manager does is cost you money. And bad property managers can cost you a lot of money. So I think it's kind of obvious what makes for a good property manager versus a bad one. But the question is, how do you tell the difference between them? This is what I can't really give you concrete answers for, but I can tell you my personal process. So let's say I need a property manager. I actually just kind of went through this recently. First thing I'm going to do, best thing you can do is find out if there are other investors in the area that you own the property and see if they have any recommendations. If someone's having a really good experience with a property manager, all day long, that's the easiest, go for it. Like, see if, piggyback off of their experience. That's easy. But let's say you don't know anyone in that area. Funny enough, the first place I go to is Yelp. And you wouldn't even think about, at least I never thought about Yelp being somewhere for property management companies. But what's cool about Yelp is that both owners and tenants can leave reviews for this company. And I think it's a huge thing where if tenants are raving about a property management company, that says a lot, because that means if they need a repair, it's getting done quickly, they're getting checked up on. Like if the tenants are being taken care of, that means that the property manager is doing some level of good job because they're taking care of the tenants and probably your property. If tenants, now obviously there's going to be people who are just unjustifiably yelling about something or complaining about something. The best property manager on the planet may have bad reviews from a bitter tenant. But if tenants are consistently saying they never come out and fix the repairs, they come out and fix it and nothing ever changes, they don't take my maintenance repair cost, they don't communicate with me, like how a property manager is with a tenant is very likely how they're going to be with you. And then obviously you can possibly see reviews from owners. Now, Yelp, it's not like a restaurant where they may have 500 reviews. There's probably not going to be that many reviews, because I don't even think people would probably think about rating companies on Yelp or Google or whatever. So there may not be that many, but a couple of the really good property managers I've worked with had like 4 and 5 star reviews on Yelp. And I noticed there was a correlation. I think Yelp can be pretty accurate. Same with Google reviews, like I said. But you're not always going to be able to find it through Google reviews or Yelp or other referrals. So then what? Very basically, just Google property managers in whatever city it's in and just start calling them. This is the part that I can't really give you an exact science on how to do it, but just speaking to somebody on the phone tells me a lot. So for instance, if I'm having to pry information out of them, probably not very helpful. But if they are very obviously smarter than I am, and oftentimes I'll have a list of questions, like I want to do, due diligence and vetting, and I have certain questions. Quite often, they'll give me a lot of that information without me even having to prompt them. They'll be like, oh yeah, here's the service we offer. We charge this, we do this, we have a certain number of scheduled inspections. Your primary communication would be through here. Email is easiest, we'll set you up for direct deposit. If they can explain their services really clearly and in a language you understand, and you guys are already communicating very easily and you're enjoying your communication with this person, again, this is the furthest thing from exact science, but it makes such a big difference, because like I said, communication is arguably the biggest component of this kind of relationship. So if you have that communication from the get-go, it's a big difference, versus if you have bad communication from the get-go. Let's say they don't call you back for a few days, or they never call you back, or you have an appointment scheduled to talk to them and they miss it. It's like dating. How they are in the beginning is probably going to carry through. They're not suddenly going to be different, once you sign a contract. So really judge them on those initial experiences. Are you enjoying it? Do they sound like they know what they're doing? You may not even know exactly what would constitute a property manager knowing what they're doing, but that's why they're the property manager, and they're smarter than you. So really they should be educating you on how this kind of works. You need to know enough to know what to ask, like what's the entire fee breakdown? Do you do inspections? Do you do direct deposit? What's your maintenance process? Like, do you let me know if there's a maintenance cost? Do you charge straight maintenance cost, or do you upcharge that? Like, am I paying you a fee for that? So you do want to have some basic knowledge of what's going on. But again, ultimately, they should be smarter than you. So that is kind of my process, is I first look for reviews or referrals and see if I can find anyone that really stands out there. And then I just go to Google and property managers. I have properties in Atlanta, Georgia, property manager, Atlanta, Georgia, and just kind of look through the companies. And if you have never done this before, call 5 different companies. And even if you have no idea really what you're looking for, probably of those companies, 1 or 2 are going to stand out more than the others. So, it's kind of like a comparison. It's like if you're shopping for things, you have comparison factor. So you can be like, I really enjoyed talking to them. Like, they sounded really smart. Well, put a check mark next to them and think about, possibly pursuing them versus the guy who never called you back. I have a funny story. One time I was interviewing property managers and I called one guy and I don't remember what fee I was talking about, but there was some fee involved. And I said, what all services do you offer? And he really didn't tell me a whole lot. And I said something to the effect of, well, what is that fee that I'm paying you? What exactly is that getting me? I think with this particular, I think what it was is that I was still the one who would coordinate the contractor, like if there needed to be work done. Like for some reason, this one wasn't totally hands off. Like I would do a lot of these jobs. So I had said to him, if I'm in charge of a lot of these things, what am I getting by paying you this fee? And he said, well, he got kind of snarky. He goes, we have office expenses. How do you think we buy our staplers? And I was like, so I realized that the money I pay you is obviously going to fund the business side, but you're really telling me on the phone that the money I pay you is going to buy your stapler while I'm busy calling the contractors. That was kind of an extreme example, but like it happened. So, it's in that initial conversation. And then the last thing you can check is, and this doesn't, I don't have enough experience with this to know that if somebody is involved with this organization that it means they're great, but the acronym is NARPM, National Association of Residential Property Managers. A couple of my property managers are this is like the national organization of property managers. So when you're a member of that, the assumption would be that you're a little bit more on the up and up. Like I said, I don't know what the entry requirements are for a property manager or property management company to be part of that organization, if it means you're, on a higher level than everyone else. But you could check, see if they're members of that. It probably means maybe they're, I don't know, a little more serious about their business. Or if you're looking for people in your area, you could go to NARPM's, it always messes me up on the acronym, NARPM's website, and you can type in like locate a property manager, and you can get the list of people who are involved in their organization. So the last mention I will say about good versus bad property managers is this has happened to me so many times. A property manager, whether it's an individual or a company, quite often can start out fantastic. This is constantly happening to me. There is a cycle, in my opinion. Quite often, and this is not speaking for all of them, but quite often you have a really, really good property manager. Well, what happens when that's the case? Well, all of their clients, me included, are recommending them to everybody. So suddenly this really good property manager grows like to crazy levels. And it's a good problem to have, but this is a very famous problem with businesses in general, is if they grow too fast. Well, property managers aren't always the best on like the business logistics side and like business skill side. They're good at property management. So quite often they grow too fast or too big and they don't have the systems in place. And all of a sudden, the first sign, can you tell I'm bitter and traumatized about this? The first sign is the communication suddenly drops off. In the beginning, I communicate with these guys so well. And I'm like, oh man, I love this property manager. They're so on top of things. And I even enjoy our phone conversations if we ever have to talk. Then all of a sudden, can't get them on the phone. Or they say they're going to do something and it never happens. Or they say something's going to change and it never happens. It's the first thing that happens every single time. You can hear it on the video. I have no idea what's happening outside my window right now, but I live in Venice Beach, and I don't even want to know what the noise was. And if you couldn't hear it on the video, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. Something very loud just went by my house. But just remember, just because they start out phenomenal doesn't mean they're going to remain phenomenal. And you as the investor, owner, you have to keep an eye out for this. And this is the one thing that's really messed me up along the years, is I let it go on for too long. I know the signs and I don't want to jump ship too soon because, maybe someone's having a bad situation or they're having a challenge or whatever, and they just need, it's kind of a hiccup. I'm totally open to that. But when the hiccup goes on and it keeps not getting fixed, you've got to make a move quickly and get rid of that property manager and move on to the next one, because as long as they get bad, your investment is the thing taking the heat. So I just switched to a new manager with a lot of my properties, and one of the properties it needed a certain amount of maintenance. So we're finding this out now, right? Like the manager at the time, of course, didn't tell me they needed a certain amount of maintenance and it never got done. So now I'm finding this out from the new manager. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I can't believe this house wasn't being taken care of. And they said it was. That property manager charged me insane overages. They weren't taking care of my properties. And it's a hard thing to know that's happening because I'm not local to the properties. So, it's at first sign when things start to go haywire. In my experience, they continue to go haywire to the point of costing me a lot of money. So that's the last message about, kind of summarizing what we talked about. We all are kind of probably clear on what makes for a good manager versus a bad one. Just things are going well and I'm making all my money I should. But then how to decide who's who and who's in what category, I don't know. But then also understanding just because they're in the good category to start doesn't mean it's not going to shift along the way, and you've got to be ready to make a change about that. So, property management is, I wrote an article one time called Surviving the Hell We Call Property Management. It's really nobody's favorite topic. It's probably everyone's least favorite part of the equation. If you are using property managers, like if you're buying non-local to where you live, they offer a lot of benefit. I continue to use them, but they can be a little bit of a headache and they're changing all the time. And quite often the pools of available managers aren't that great. So, just be aware of all of that. And I'll actually include a link to the Surviving the Hell We Call Property Management article in the comments, so you can read more about it. But yeah, really gut instincts are very helpful. Again, this is not science. I know a lot of people want, sciencey how-tos, but really, really gauge things off of that communication. I think that's your number one tip-off as far as whether you're dealing with a good or a bad property manager.